How's it going, guys? It's Poacher Son, and welcome back to the episode of the Europa Universalis 4 Dutch Return campaign, where last episode we were talking, while we're finishing up this war with Tondo or whatever, last episode we were talking about how southern I am. And I was saying how I am not really southern. I don't really consider myself to be southern. And I think we're going to continue with that discussion so we have something to talk about at least while we finish up this war. Hey, we have 3 stability, which I believe makes the thing go away. Nice. Yeah, it's interesting, the idea of southernness or any, ness being any culture, or whatever. I find that an interesting sort of way that people try to distinguish themselves from others. That's one thing that so in Spain, Musca gone. That's definitely in the New World. Musca gone up there, yeah. When I was in Spain, one thing that I could never really understand was, well, sort of like, I don't know, not even that. I understood it, I guess, but, with, like, my friend that's from Spain that I made there, I've talked about her quite a few times before, but there's a, how do I say this? I think there's, like, a certain difference in just cultural perspectives on certain things that is hard to understand or hard to explain, I guess. Not even hard to understand. I sort of get why. It's sort of hard to explain to people that aren't American or Canadian or Australian and stuff, I guess. Sort of the idea. Well, no. I don't even think that's true. I don't think it's like. I think it's sort of a thing based on being from like a colonial country, but I think it also depends. I think also people from like Britain will sort of get this, or get this feeling, but I think in certain senses it is people in Spain, like my friend, for example, she never like necessarily understood the idea of Americans being like mixed nationalities. Like the idea that in America your last name might be German. Or let's take a better example of something that's like more easy to sort of define the stereotype around, like Norwegian. Norwegians and Swedish people, a lot of times, we think of them having like a lot more like blonde hair people, I mean that's true to a certain extent. Just like we think of like Irish people being like redheads and stuff, more so. That's stereotypes, but to a certain extent, stuff like that is true. And that's why the stereotypes exist. But with that, I think, in America, we have people that have like a last name that is from a specific country, and they don't look like anyone from that country. Here's a go, like Italian people. Lots of Italian people have a little more like they have a Mediterranean look. They have a little bit darker skin and stuff. And same with like people from Spain. They're still like white, like they're still Caucasian, but they have a little bit of a darker skin color. Sometimes, not all. There's a lot of variety in Italy and Spain, both, and stuff like that. Still, but in general, there's like a little bit of a darker skin tone, and so when in America, a lot of times there's a huge Italian American sort of heritage in all of the U.S., but especially in like the Northeast and stuff, and the East Coast, and with that, then I think it's interesting that like a lot of there's tons of people, I've met I've known countless people that have Italian last names, and they don't really look Italian because like, you know, out of that Italian lineage, maybe half of it is Italian. Maybe, you know, for instance, let's talk about my lineage, I guess. So like for me, my family. I guess this example might not even work very well. My last name is English, but my mom's last name is, I believe, German, but then her mom's maiden name, my grandma on that side's maiden name, is Scottish. The grandma on my other side's name is, I think, German as well. I'm trying to think. I'm not even sure, but 24th of June. All right, June we can peace out. Can we make it with that? Ooh, yeah, do that. Can we make it to June? Probably. So, so with that, then. But like when you look at me, I don't necessarily. I mean, to be honest, I probably look more English than anything else. But it's not like you can't see the Scottish or German part of my heritage in me, really. Like, you know, we're all just mixed, you know, mixed people, mixed white people. If you're African American, you know, then you're a mix of, like, you know, African American people. It's not like, you know, you'd be able to look at a African American person in the U.S. and say, you know, your heritage is from, you know, this country. And again, I'm trying to not be offensive. I'm saying I don't mean this in a racist way at all. I'm just like literally just talking about like when you look at someone in America, you can't really tell where they're from normally. I think with like first or second generation, I mean, obviously first generation is like, you know, they're from that country, so obviously you'd still be able to see it then. But even with like with second generation people, you could probably still tell a little bit. But you know, there's so much. There's not really any. I'm trying to say this in a way without coming across as being racist, because I really don't mean it to be. In fact, like this is sort of one of the strengths of America, and something that I think we should celebrate, is the fact that we have so much diverse mixture and in diversity. We're not just diverse in the sense that there's different parts of our country that are different ethnicity and different religion and whatnot. I think part of the really good things that America has going for it is that we have a lot of mixture. It's not just like, you know, there's this and in big cities obviously there's like neighborhoods that are like split up by gender, but in general it's pretty mixed. I think, at least in general, that's my perception of it, of the country. Let's wait. I think we're gonna peace out this month. So yeah, I don't know, but the idea of like, so let's get back to what I was talking about originally. With my Spanish friend, I would be like, she's like, I'd be telling her, you know, how. Well, I'm trying to think about one of our specific discussions. I'd be telling her about, like, for instance, like my last name or something, and my family, and how they're all from, you know, go back to different countries originally. And she'd be like, you know, isn't that kind of weird to you, though, that you have, like, German ancestry and then English ancestry? I'm like, no, because, like, in general, I don't consider myself to be any of those things. I'm just American. And I think she was kind of like, you know, doesn't make sense to me. And I found that really interesting. It was just sort of a difference that we had in I think how we were raised and stuff. Because of the fact that we have sort of like a melting pot culture, and again, to a certain extent, that doesn't really hold up. There's a lot of criticism of that model of looking at things, and I think a lot of them have good reason to be critical of it. But, you know, there is sort of a... And again, a lot of the reason that those criticisms exist is extremely valid in the sense that a lot of it is fairly Eurocentric. Not, in this case, not Eurocentric, but, you know, white-centric, I guess would be a good way to put it. That it's just true, you know. A lot of it is made sort of with the basis on European immigrants, when that was a thing. And with that being said, we are over 100 overextension, by the way. I knew we were going to be when I did that, but I basically, you know, if we have one bad event, whatever. I try to be. I'm sorry that I'm going so slow with how I'm talking about this. I'm trying to say it in a non-offensive way, you know, because I really don't mean to be racist or anything, and I hope I'm not going across as racist or anything like that. Excuse you. Oh, that's right. Anhalt is the emperor. I forgot about that. No, screw you. We should definitely go to war with Lubeck then, because only Anhalt will defend them. You know, not a big deal. But yeah, I think there's sort of a certain cultural acceptance of the idea of having people that are from so many varied different places, that it's a bit different to talk to someone who's from a culture where that's not as much of a thing. The idea of everyone being sort of mixing together, or there not being any cultural norms associated with that. So, like, for instance, with my roommate, my roommate from when I was in Spain, we were doing so we did a house stay stuff. That was an option at least, and I was in a house stay with an older lady that you know, that like fed us and stuff, and it was cool because we got to talk to her and stuff, and gave us interaction with, you know, someone from the area and whatnot. Oh god, whatnot. But we sort of had this discussion with her, and the same thing happened where she was like, I don't sort of get it, like, because essentially, so my roommate, he is Cuban American. His mother is, but the thing is, like, saying Cuban American implies that he's like an immigrant or something, like he is a second generation immigrant. That's not even the case. His mom is American. She's like third generation, not Italian, Irish immigrant. That her family's traditionally from New York. And then his dad is Cuban. Like he is from Cuba and now lives in Madrid. But that's a good example where, and, you know, and then his mom, you know, his mom they don't live together, like they divorced or whatever a long time ago, before, like, when he was really young. But his dad lived in Cuba during most of his time growing up, and now lives in Madrid. And his mom raised him in the Boston area, or actually I think it was a little further west of Boston, but in Massachusetts. So he has grown up in Massachusetts his whole life. He is just American. His mom is just American, and it's not like they're immigrants. But when he was in Spain, a lot of time people would be like, you know, like my friend, she was like, wait, are you like, you know, Latin American or something? He'd be like, oh, my dad's Cuban, because he does a bit darker skin. But yeah, because his dad is Afro-Cuban, you know, is darker skin. So he's like mixed. He looks mixed when you see him, but I mean, he's just American, you know. And so when I would, you know, like but when our friend learned that his dad is Cuban, and then they just started calling him, like, you know, El Cubano, the Cuban, like in the friend group of the people that we had met there, because in their eyes, like, you know, he's Cuban. That's like the main thing they notice about him. But, like, again, so it's sort of a weird idea where it's like, you know, even though, sure, I mean, he's Cuban and American, he's still just like American, you know. And I don't know. It's not racism. Like, it wasn't ever meant in like a negative way, as far as I could tell, at least. But it is interesting, and I'm not sure how to describe it. It's sort of because of the fact that literally everyone in the U.S. besides Native Americans is immigrants. I think we have sort of like, there's no idea of a cultural home ground. It's not like saying I don't have any reason to care about, like, I mean, this is gonna sound mean. I don't mean it in a mean way. I don't have any reason to really like care about what happens to England or Germany, the main places of my family's heritage, because I'm not from there. I've never been to Germany, never been to England. And I think that's the thing in Europe, there seem, again, there's plenty of Europeans that watch my videos, so, feel free to correct me and say if you have a different experience, but at least in Spain when I was there, it seemed like, if you were to meet someone new, they'd be like, and you could, someone could tell that they were not from Spain, they'd be like, where are you from? And then they would tell you where you're from, they're like, oh, I love this people from this country, or like, oh, this country's so cool, and we still do that in America for sure, but then, there's this aspect where there's not as much of a mixture of immigration dating back as old as the U.S. Because I know that, especially nowadays, there's plenty of movement and stuff. I mean, for instance, my teacher that I talked about, her husband was French. One of the administrators of our program there is French as well. There's plenty of people from Italy and Spain. There's plenty of people from Spain and Italy and stuff, but I think that's more of a recent development, like the last 100 years is what I mean by that. It's not as old as it is in the U.S. However, it's a couple hundred years. I mean, even in the U.S., it really picked up in the late 1800s. So I guess there's not too much of a difference there. But the idea of there being this, I don't even think I'm articulating this very well. But I think there is a sort of a cultural difference, and it's not a bad thing at all. I don't really mean that to be a bad thing at all. It's just a sort of something that makes it a little different makes it a little hard to necessarily describe to someone who's not American. Lots of times I think they just kind of a different way of approaching the world. It really is. If you're I'm trying to think of other examples. It's so hard to describe what I'm trying to say. Oh god, we're about to hit the timer. I will go a little longer. I think I just need to think about how to word this better for a second. Yeah, give me a second and I'll try to think about what am I trying to say here? Again, I don't mean this to be offensive or bad or negative at all. I mean, of course, it would be negative when people do when people are racist, but I don't think in general people are racist in any country in the world. Obviously, there are going to be racist people, but in every country, but Let's think about what I mean. Oh, God. Yeah, go there and there. So many rebels right now. So many rebels. I'm still trying to think about how I'm trying to word this. I'm trying to think about the specific conversations that I know I had with my friend, because there was one thing that struck me as being sort of a big cultural difference in the way that she approached stuff like that, I guess part of it is that the idea that you're I don't know. Sort of the idea that your nationality is determined by your heritage. And again, of course, take everything I say with a grain of salt. A lot of this is my perceptions. Maybe it's only a Spanish thing. Maybe it's just a thing I'm sort of misperceived in the moment. Is a misconception. But for instance, I think there was sort of a feeling that I got where people the idea that your heritage determines your nationality, not necessarily where you were born even. for instance, and like your last name, you know. For instance, you know, I would, when I told my friend that my last name is like English, but then I like German heritage. She's like, so you don't like consider yourself part German or part English? And I'm like, no, I don't. I just consider myself American. But then when I was in Spain, I taught at a school there, like a middle school, or a secondary, like I think it was an all-age school, but I taught some like 13-year-olds, and they and I remember like hearing in class they were like talking about how one of the kids has like a German last name. So like, wait, so you're German then? And he's like, well, I mean, like my dad's German. And I think he was born in Spain. His mom is Spanish and stuff. But they're like, oh, it's like you're part German then, and whatnot. And that's the thing. I think that seemed to me like there was some cultural difference in like describing how, like how you would describe someone, whether or not you describe them as being like a German person living in Spain versus like a person who has what is the generational limit in European perspective of oh my god, they went all the way over there. What is the European perspective on that? I really want to know, because it seemed to me like European perspective was that like just because you were born in a country and have lived there your whole life doesn't necessarily mean you're that nationality. Like if you, for instance, if you were like from lived in Spain your whole life, but your parents are both German, you wouldn't be considered Spanish. You'd just be considered a German person living in Spain. That's what it seemed like to me, or like, I'm trying to think of another example, like, or if you were, what is the limit there for how you consider someone their nationality be? What is the limit? Because in the U.S., I think it's really like, second generation people sort of, I think, would call you, if saying let's see, if you're, for instance, from Japan, if your family is from Japan, all the islands are colonized, literally all of them. If you're from Japan, someone would probably call you Japanese American as a second generation, or as a first generation once you get your citizenship or whatever. Whereas if you are, I hate every colonizer in this game. Whereas if you're from, once you get like even second generation, I guess you would call someone like Japanese American in that example of like a Japanese person. But if you are, what about like after you get like to the third generation, then you just call them American and whatnot. Oh, the whatnots need to stop. But I didn't get the same feel from people in Spain. It was like sort of like you are where your heritage is from and stuff. And again, I don't think that it was ever really intended in a negative way. It was just sort of like the perception of you're this, your family is German, your last name is German, you look more German than anything else, so you're German, even if you've lived in Spain your whole life and whatnot. And that's sort of the feeling I got. Whether or not that's correct, please correct me, tell me your opinions, because I'm genuinely like curious about stuff like that, like cultural perceptions of stuff like that. And I could be completely wrong. That is totally possible. I do not deny that at all. But yeah, I certainly, I think, even if I'm not doing a good job of describing it, I think there is a difference there. And I don't, and I've said this a bunch of times, but I'm going to say it again, I do not mean it in any negative way at all. It's just a difference, cultural difference. Oh, okay, we need to end this video here in a second, but hey, we got a lot of good stuff going on right now. Hino has 90%, Can we lower rate? We can't lower autonomy. Darn. That'd be nice. Okay. I'm gonna end this episode here. Thank you guys for watching. This will probably be the last one for this session, honestly. But I am interested to see your guys' thoughts on that whole like theory, because again, it's just a theory and sort of my perceptions, which are probably not correct completely, at least. But I don't know. It's interesting learning about like cultural differences between the way we perceive our nationality as a thing, because nationality is just sort of like a made-up concept in the first place. So I guess that's the main thing. Is like to wrap it all up is like the thing that I felt was different was like the perceived idea of being able to be considered one, like one nationality, in my case American, when your heritage might lean so strongly in another direction or whatever, and not have other people view you as differently. Like it's normal for people here to, in the US to be like, oh, I got like Italian American heritage, or Italian heritage and some Irish mixed in there. And I think that's a little strange to, like, at least to my friend in Spain and some like her friends, it's a little strange to be like, say for them to hear that, be like, it's kind of like, you don't consider yourself one or the other, you consider yourself both or neither, and then and it's like, how does that work in your mind when these things are two completely different things here in Europe, which they still are, and they still exist. And so I think that was interesting. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please go leave a like and subscribe for it, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye bye.